Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Vessel Horizon and watched the stars through the main window. The ship was small compared to the massive war vessels of the Korethian Empire or the sleek cruisers of the Zephyrian Collective. It was just a patrol ship, really, with basic weapons and old shields that barely worked half the time. Jake had been commanding the ship for 3 years now, patrolling the edge of human space. Like a guard dog that nobody really expected to bite, the galaxy was not kind to humans. 50 years ago, when Earth first made contact with alien civilizations, everyone thought it would be humanity's golden age. They were wrong. The Galactic Federation welcomed humans, sure, but only as the bottom tier of a vast cosmic hierarchy. Humans were good for mining asteroids, fixing broken machinery, and doing the jobs that nobody else wanted. They were not good at fighting wars or building advanced technology or conquering worlds. The Korethian Empire controlled the Eastern Spiral Arm with their energy weapons that could melt through ship hulls like butter. The Zephyrian Collective dominated the core worlds with their shields that could stop anything in armor that never seemed to break. The ancient Vorthan sovereignty ruled the Outer Rim through fear, using their psychic powers to control minds and crush rebellions before they started. And then there were humans, scattered across a few dozen worlds, grateful for whatever scraps the bigger powers threw their way. Jake walked over to the communications station, where Lieutenant Amy Foster was monitoring the long-range sensors. Amy was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that still held some hope that things might get better someday. Jake envied her that hope. He had lost his own hope somewhere between his 10th rejected application for a real command and his 20th reminder that human ships were not welcome in Federation military operations. "Anything interesting out there today?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Their patrol route took them through empty space, far from any real action. The Federation kept human ships away from important areas, claiming it was for their own protection. Jake knew better. They were kept away because nobody trusted them to handle anything important. Amy shook her head and pointed at her screen. "Just the usual background noise, sir. Some merchant traffic heading toward the colony worlds. A few mining ships coming back from the asteroid belt. Nothing that requires our attention." Jake nodded and was about to turn away when Amy frowned at her console. "Wait, sir. I'm picking up something strange. It's a distress beacon, but it's very faint. The signal is old, maybe months old, but it's definitely human." "Where is it coming from?" Jake asked, moving closer to look at the screen. Amy worked her controls for a moment, then looked up with surprise. "It's from the Meridian sector, sir. That's been empty space for decades. According to the records, there was a colony ship that went missing out there about 40 years ago. The UESS Pathfinder, carrying 5,000 colonists to a new world." Jake felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. Curiosity, maybe, or just the desire to do something that mattered. "Plot a course for that." "Signal, Lieutenant. Best speed." "Sir," Amy said carefully, "the Meridian sector is outside our patrol area. Federation regulations say we need permission from command before we can investigate." Jake looked at his young communications officer and saw the same hunger in her eyes that he felt in his own chest. The hunger to do something real, something important, something that might actually help someone. How long would it take to get permission from command? "At least 3 days, sir. Maybe a week if the bureaucrats are feeling particularly slow." "And how long would it take us to reach that signal?" Amy checked her calculations. 8 hours at full speed, sir." Jake made his decision. It was the kind of decision that could end his career, but his career was already going nowhere anyway. "Set course for the Meridian sector. Full speed. We'll worry about Federation regulations later." The bridge crew looked at him with surprise. They were used to following orders, doing their patrol routes, and staying out of trouble. But Jake could see something else in their faces, too. Relief, maybe, or excitement. They were tired of being ignored, tired of being treated like second-class citizens in their own galaxy. Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station. She was the ship's xenobiologist, a brilliant woman who had been stuck on a patrol ship because the Federation did not trust humans with important research positions. Captain, if that really is the Pathfinder, it could be significant. That ship was carrying some of Earth's best scientists and researchers. If something happened to them, we might learn something important. Jake nodded. That's exactly what I'm thinking, Doctor. Helm, engage. The Horizon turned away from its boring patrol route and headed toward the unknown. For the first time in years, Jake felt like he was doing something that mattered. He had no idea that this decision would change everything, not just for his crew, but for all of humanity. The signal they were chasing would lead them to a discovery that would shake the foundations of the galaxy and prove that sometimes the weakest can become the strongest in ways nobody expects. The U-East Pathfinder hung in space like a ghost ship, its hull dark and cold against the stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the shuttle bay of the Horizon, watching as Commander Ryan Clark ran final checks on their equipment. The away team was small, just 4 people, but it was all they could spare from their skeleton crew. Ryan was Jake's second in command, a steady man who never complained about their low status in the Federation. He had been with Jake for 2 years now, and Jake trusted him completely. Security Chief Maria Santos checked her sidearm one more time, her dark eyes serious as she studied the readings from the dead ship. Dr. Lisa Hayes carried her scientific equipment, ready to solve whatever mystery they found aboard the Pathfinder. The ship looks intact from the outside, Ryan said, closing his scanner. No signs of battle damage, no hull breaches, no indication of what killed the crew. The power systems are completely dead, but the hull is sound. Maria frowned at her own readings. I'm not detecting any life signs, but that's not surprising after 40 years. What bothers me is that the ship's position doesn't match its planned route. According to the records, the Pathfinder was supposed to be heading for the Kepler system. This is nowhere near their intended destination. Dr. Hayes looked up from her equipment. The ship's been drifting for decades, but you're right. Even accounting for drift, they were way off course when they stopped here. Something made them change direction. Jake made the decision. We go aboard. Ryan, you're with me. Maria, watch our backs. Dr. Hayes, find out what happened to these people. The shuttle docked with the Pathfinder's main airlock without difficulty. The ship's systems were dead, but the mechanical locks still worked. Jake felt the familiar weight of a portable atmosphere generator on his back as they cycled through the airlock. The corridor beyond was pitch black until their lights cut through the darkness. The ship was perfectly preserved in the cold of space. Jake had seen derelict ships before, but they usually showed signs of damage or decay. The Pathfinder looked like its crew had simply vanished one day, leaving everything exactly as it was. Personal belongings sat on tables, meal trays were still in the galley, and clothing hung in lockers, as if waiting for their owners to return. This is wrong, Maria said quietly, her voice tight with tension. Ships don't just die like this. Where are the bodies? They found their answer in the crew quarters. The bodies were there, all right, perfectly preserved by the cold vacuum of space. But something was terribly wrong with them. The corpses showed no signs of violence or disease. Instead, they looked like they had died of pure terror. Their faces were twisted in expressions of absolute horror, their hands clawed as if they had been trying to escape from something that existed only in their minds. My God, Dr. Hayes whispered, kneeling beside one of the bodies. Look at this. No wounds, no signs of poisoning or radiation exposure. But look at their faces. Whatever killed them, it was something they saw or experienced, not something physical. Ryan was examining the ship's computer systems. I'm getting some power to the auxiliary computers. It looks like they were running some kind of research. Project when they died. The files are encrypted, but I might be able to crack them. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. What kind of research? Unknown, sir. But there are references to something called Project Pandora. The files mention psychological studies, cognitive patterns, and something about weaponizing human creativity. Dr. Hayes looked up sharply. Weaponizing creativity? That doesn't make sense. Creativity is a mental process, not a weapon. Maria found the ship's final log entry in the captain's quarters. The recording was damaged, but they could make out most of it. Captain Patricia Wells appeared on the screen, her face haggard and her eyes wild with fear. Her voice shook as she spoke. Personal log, Captain Wells, final entry. The experiment has gone too far. Dr. Carter and his team thought they could harness human ingenuity, turn our ability to think outside the box into some kind of weapon. They built a device that could amplify and broadcast human thought patterns. The first tests seemed promising. We could overwhelm alien computer systems with chaotic human logic. But then something went wrong. The recording flickered and jumped. Wells continued, her voice barely a whisper. The test subjects started breaking down. Too much creativity, too many possibilities, too many ways to solve every problem. Their minds couldn't handle it. They became paralyzed by infinite options. Then they started seeing things that weren't there. The chaos in their heads became too much to bear. The recording cut to static, and Wells appeared again, looking directly into the camera with eyes that held no hope. I've ordered the destruction of all research materials, but it may be too late. The device is still broadcasting. I can feel it in my head, all the possibilities, all the different ways everything could be, or should be, or might be. It's beautiful and terrible, and I can't make it stop. If anyone finds this ship, don't try to complete the project. Some weapons are too dangerous to use, even against our enemies. The recording ended. Jake and his team stood in silence, absorbing what they had learned. Somewhere aboard this dead ship was a weapon that could drive people insane with pure human creativity. A weapon that had killed 5,000 people because they could not handle the full power of human imagination unleashed upon their minds. We need to find that device, Dr. Hayes said quietly. If the technology still exists, if we could control it properly, it might be exactly what humanity needs to level the playing field with the other species. Jake looked at his science officer with concern. Dr. Hayes, you heard what happened to the crew. This thing killed them all. But they didn't understand what they were dealing with, Dr. Hayes replied, her eyes bright with possibility. They tried to use raw human creativity as a blunt instrument. But what if we could refine it, control it, use it precisely, instead of just unleashing chaos? Captain, this could be the key to everything. This could be how humanity finally proves we belong in this galaxy. The emergency klaxon shattered the quiet of the Horizon's bridge like a hammer blow. Captain Jake Morrison rushed from his quarters where he had been studying the Pathfinder research files with Dr. Hayes. Lieutenant, Amy Foster's face was pale as she turned from her communications console. Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Susan Wright is requesting immediate contact with all human vessels in the outer sectors. Jake felt his stomach drop. Priority messages from Earth Command were never good. News. Put her through, Lieutenant. Admiral Wright appeared on the main screen, her weathered face grim with bad news. Behind her, Jake could see the chaos of Earth Command's operations center, with officers running between stations and emergency lights flashing. All human vessels in the outer sectors, This is Admiral Wright with Emergency Protocol 7. As of 2 hours ago, the Carethian Empire has launched a full-scale assault on our colony worlds. Kepler Station is under siege. New Geneva has gone dark, and we've lost contact with at least 6 other settlements. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Jake had friends on New Geneva, a peaceful farming world with no military defenses. The thought of Carethian warships attacking defenseless colonists made his blood boil. Admiral Wright continued, her voice steady despite the crisis. All human ships are ordered to withdraw immediately to the core defensive perimeter around Earth and Mars. Do not attempt to engage enemy forces. Do not attempt rescue operations. I repeat, all human vessels will retreat to the core worlds immediately. This is not a request. This is a direct order. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Jake stared at the blank screen, feeling anger rise in his chest like a tide. Retreat. Run away. Leave thousands of innocent people to die because the Federation didn't think humans were strong enough to fight back. Captain, Ryan Clark said quietly, what are your orders? Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people, loyal people, who had signed up to protect humanity, even though they were stuck on an old patrol ship that nobody respected. Amy Foster, barely out of the academy, still believed they could make a difference. Maria Santos, who had left a promising career in Federation security to serve on a human ship. Dr. Hayes, brilliant enough to work anywhere in the galaxy, but choosing to stay with her own kind. How long would it take us to reach the nearest colony world under attack? Jake asked. Ryan checked his console. Ceres colony is closest, sir. 4 hours at maximum speed. But Captain, we received direct orders to retreat. I heard the orders. Commander. Jake walked to the center of the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human families were hiding in shelters while Carethian warships burned their cities. Somewhere out there, children were crying for parents who might never come home. An Earth command wanted him to run away. Dr. Hayes stepped forward. Captain, I know what you're thinking, but we're one ship against an entire Carethian battle fleet. The Horizon isn't equipped for this kind of fight. Our weapons can barely scratch their armor, and our shields won't last 5 minutes against their energy cannons. You're right, Dr. Hayes. In a conventional fight, we don't stand a chance. Jake turned to face his crew. But what if we didn't fight conventionally? What if we used what we found on the Pathfinder? The bridge fell silent. They all knew what he was talking about. The research files they had recovered contained detailed plans for Project Pandora, the device that could weaponize human creativity. Dr. Hayes had spent hours studying the technical specifications, trying to understand how it worked and why it had driven the Pathfinder crew insane. Captain, Dr. Hayes said slowly, the Project Pandora device killed everyone who was exposed to it. We don't even know if it actually works as a weapon against alien minds. But we know it affects human minds, Jake replied. The question is whether alien minds work differently enough that they might react differently to human thought patterns. The Carethian Empire prides itself on logical, efficient thinking. Their entire military doctrine is based on precise calculations and optimal strategies. What would happen if we flooded their command structure with pure human chaos? Maria Santos spoke up from her security station. It's suicide, Captain. Even if the weapon works, we'd be exposing ourselves to the same mental effects that killed the Pathfinder crew. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe we can find a way to control it better than they did. Dr. Hayes, how long would it take you to modify our communications array to broadcast the Pandora signal? Dr. Hayes looked at her tablet, running quick calculations. With the engineering, staff helping, maybe 6 hours. But Captain, I have to stress that this is incredibly dangerous. We could end up just like the Pathfinder crew, dead from exposure to our own weapon. Jake nodded grimly. I understand the risks, Doctor. But right now, thousands of innocent people are dying while we debate. The Federation has written off our colony worlds as acceptable losses. They expect us to run home with our tails between our legs while good people die. He looked at each member of his crew individually. I'm not ordering anyone to stay. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to transfer to an escape pod and head for Earth has my permission. No questions asked. No black marks on your record. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Amy Foster spoke up, her young voice steady. I didn't join the Earth Defense Force to run away from fights, sir. Count me in. Maria Santos nodded. My family is on Ceres Colony, Captain. I'm not leaving. Them to die. Ryan Clark straightened his shoulders. You know I'm with you, sir. Someone has to show the galaxy the humans aren't cowards. One by one, the entire bridge crew volunteered to stay. Jake felt a surge of pride in these people, his people, who were willing to risk everything for strangers they had never met. This was what made humans different from the other species in the galaxy. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't calculate the logical response. They chose to fight anyway. All right then, Jake said. Dr. Hayes, get started on modifying the communications array. Ryan, plot a course for Ceres Colony, but keep us at the edge of sensor range. We'll only get one shot at this, so we need to make it count. Maria, start working on a way to protect our own minds from the Pandora effect. We're going to show the Corethian Empire what happens when you underestimate humanity. The engineering deck of the Horizon buzzed with desperate activity as Dr. Lisa Hayes worked alongside Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez to transform their simple communications array into something that had never existed before. Ben was a quiet man who could make miracles happen with spare parts and determination. And right now, Jake Morrison needed a miracle more than anything else in the galaxy. The theory is sound, Dr. Hayes explained as she connected neural pattern amplifiers to the ship's main transmitter. Human brains work differently from alien brains. We evolved as generalists, able to adapt to any environment, any problem, any situation. Other species evolved as specialists. The Corethians, for example, have brains optimized for logical analysis and mathematical precision. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead as he rerouted power conduits. So what happens when we hit them with human thinking patterns? If I'm right, their minds won't be able to process the chaos. Human creativity doesn't follow logical rules. We make intuitive leaps. We find solutions that shouldn't work but do. We see connections that pure logic would miss. To a Corethian mind, human thought patterns should be completely overwhelming. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Morrison watched the tactical display showing Corethian ships attacking Ceres Colony. The colony's shields were failing, and civilian transports were trying desperately to escape the battle zone. Time was running. Outdot Communications Officer Amy Foster looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. Captain, I'm monitoring Corethian military frequencies. They're using standard battle algorithms, rotating their attack patterns every 12 minutes for maximum efficiency. It's like watching a computer program in action. That's exactly what it is, Jake replied. The Corethians don't believe in improvisation or creative tactics. Everything they do follows predetermined patterns based on mathematical optimization. That's going to be their weakness. Security Chief Maria Santos approached the captain's chair with a concerned expression. Sir, I've been thinking about the mental protection protocols. The Pathfinder crew died because they couldn't handle exposure to amplified human creativity. But what if the problem wasn't the creativity itself, but the fact that they were trying to suppress it? Jake turned to face her. Explain. Humans are naturally creative and chaotic thinkers. The Pathfinder crew was trying to control and direct that chaos, turn it into a focused weapon. But maybe that's backwards. Maybe instead of fighting our natural mental patterns, we should embrace them. Let our minds be chaotic and unpredictable, and use that as protection against our own weapon. Before Jake could respond, Dr. Hayes called. From the engineering station, "Captain, we're ready for the first test. I've isolated the signal to a very narrow beam, and we have a volunteer test subject." The test subject was a Corinthian prisoner that had been captured during a border skirmish months ago. The alien sat in the ship's small brig, its forearms folded in a precise pattern that indicated calm meditation. Corinthians were tall, thin creatures with metallic skin and large black eyes that showed no emotion. This particular prisoner had been completely uncooperative during interrogation, responding to every question with mathematical formulas and logical proofs. "Technician Carlos Mendez will be our control subject," Dr. Hayes explained. "Carlos, I want you to think about the most creative solution you can imagine for fixing a broken hyperdrive with nothing but kitchen utensils and birthday cake." Carlos grinned. He was young and enthusiastic, the kind of person who saw every problem as a fun puzzle to solve. "Easy, Doc. You use the cake frosting as a conductor, the candles as replacement fuses, and the kitchen timer as a frequency regulator. Won't work for long, but it'll get you to the nearest repair station." Dr. Hayes activated the modified transmitter, focusing Carlos's thought patterns into a tight beam aimed at the Corinthian prisoner. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien's precise posture collapsed as its large eyes widened with what could only be described as panic. Its forearms began moving in random, jerky motions, and it started making sounds that its translator couldn't interpret. "It's working," Dr. Hayes said with excitement. "The Corinthian's brain is trying to process Carlos's creative solution, but it can't handle the illogical connections. Kitchen utensils and birthday cake have no mathematical relationship to hyperdrive repair, but Carlos's mind made it work anyway. The Corinthian is experiencing cognitive overload." The alien prisoner continued to thrash around in its cell, clearly distressed by the chaotic human thoughts flooding its orderly mind. After 30 seconds, Dr. Hayes shut off the transmitter, and the Corinthian gradually returned to its normal composed state, though it now watched the humans with what looked like fear. "Scale that up to a full battle fleet," Jake said quietly, "and we might just have a chance." Ben Rodriguez looked up from his engineering console. "Captain, I've finished the modifications to the main communications array. We can now broadcast human thought patterns across multiple frequencies simultaneously. The range is about 50,000 kilometers, enough to cover an entire enemy formation." "What about protecting our own crew?" Jake asked. Maria Santos stepped forward. "I've been working on that, sir. Instead of trying to shield our minds from the broadcast, I think we should do the opposite. I want every crew member to actively embrace their most chaotic, creative thoughts while the system is active. Fight fire with fire, essentially." Dr. Hayes nodded in agreement. "It's counterintuitive, but it might work. Human minds are already chaotic by alien standards. If we amplify that chaos in ourselves at the same time we're broadcasting it, we might be able to ride the wave instead of being drowned by it." Jake looked around at his crew, these brave people who were willing to risk their sanity for a desperate chance to save innocent lives. How many crew members do we need for the broadcast to be effective? The more minds we include, the more chaotic and overwhelming the signal becomes. Dr. Hayes replied, "I'd recommend using the entire crew. 43 people, all thinking their most creative, illogical, human thoughts at the same time. And if it doesn't work?" Dr. Hayes met his eyes steadily. "Then we end up like the Pathfinder crew, sir. Dead. From exposure to our own weapon." Jake nodded grimly. "Understood. Amy, open a ship-wide channel." The communication system crackled to life, carrying Jake's voice to every corner of the horizon. All hands, this is the captain. In 10 minutes, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We're going to use our own minds as weapons against the enemy. I need every person on this ship to think the most creative, chaotic, illogical thoughts they can manage. Don't try to make sense. Don't try to be rational. Be as human as possible. Our lives and the lives of thousands of colonists depend on it. The Corethian battle fleet hung in space above Ceres' colony, like vultures circling wounded prey. 12 massive warships arranged in perfect geometric formation, their energy weapons systematically destroying the colony's defensive platforms. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display from the bridge of the horizon, counting down the minutes until the colony's shields would fail completely. Corethian Fleet Commander is broadcasting surrender demands, Amy Foster reported from her communication station. Standard terms? Complete submission, relocation of all colonists to designated work camps, transfer of all resources to the Empire. Jake felt his jaw clench. The Corethians didn't just conquer worlds, they enslaved entire populations. Men, women, and children would spend the rest of their lives in labor camps, mining resources for an empire that saw them as nothing more than useful animals. Not today, Jake said quietly. Amy, open a channel to the Corethian fleet. All frequencies. Sir, are you sure? Once we broadcast, there's no going back. I'm sure. Dr. Hayes, is the Pandora array ready? Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station, her face pale but determined. All systems are green, Captain. The neural pattern amplifiers are linked to every crew station on the ship. When you give the word, every human thought on this vessel will be broadcast directly into the Corethian communication network. Jake activated the ship's internal communications. All hands, this is your captain. In 30 seconds, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity. Don't think logically. Don't follow procedures. Don't make sense. Think like humans. Think like the chaotic, creative, impossible species that somehow survived and thrived on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Throughout the ship, 43 human beings began to let their minds wander into realms of pure creativity. In engineering, Ben Rodriguez thought about building a spaceship out of musical instruments and flower petals. In the galley, cook Patricia Lane imagined recipes that combined impossible ingredients in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow created perfect flavors. In the medical bay, Dr. Kevin Park considered surgical techniques that involved interpretive dance and finger painting. On the bridge, Security Chief Maria Santos thought about battle strategies based on children's games and nursery rhymes. Communications. Officer Amy Foster imagined translating alien languages through the medium of abstract art and emotional colors. Commander Ryan Clark contemplated navigation routes that followed the paths of migrating butterflies through dimensions that existed. Only in dreams, Captain Morrison himself focused on the most human thought he could manage. He thought about hope. Not logical hope based on statistical analysis of probable outcomes, but the kind of pure, stubborn, illogical hope that made humans keep fighting even when every rational calculation said they should give up. The hope that made farmers plant seeds in bad soil, that made explorers sail toward unknown horizons, that made ordinary people do extraordinary things simply because someone needed help. Corethian fleet is responding to our hail, Amy reported, her voice dreamy as her mind wandered through landscapes of musical mathematics and colorful equations. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Corethian flagship. Fleet Commander Zareth appeared, a tall figure in gleaming armor, its metallic face showing typical Corethian composure. Its voice was precise and emotionless as it spoke. Human vessel, You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You cannot interfere with Imperial operations." Jake smiled, feeling the chaotic energy of his crew's thoughts flowing through the ship's neural network. "Commander Zareth, I'm afraid we can't do that. You see, you made one critical error in your calculations. Human logic is irrelevant. Surrender or die. You assumed we would act logically," Jake continued, his smile growing wider. "But humans don't do logical, Commander. We do impossible. Dr. Hayes, activate the Pandora array. Full power, all frequencies." The effect was immediate and devastating. 43 human minds, all thinking their most creative and chaotic thoughts, suddenly broadcast their mental patterns directly into the Carethian fleet's communication network. The carefully ordered, mathematically precise minds of the Carethian officers were instantly overwhelmed by the flood of human creativity. On the main screen, Commander Zareth's composed expression shattered like glass. Its 4 arms began moving in random patterns as its mind tried desperately to process the impossible connections that human creativity made seem natural. How could musical instruments become spaceship components? How could flower petals provide structural support? How could finger painting be a valid surgical technique? Throughout the Carethian fleet, officers abandoned their stations as their minds reeled under the assault of pure human imagination. Battle algorithms collapsed as commanders became paralyzed by infinite tactical possibilities that made no mathematical sense but somehow felt viable. Navigation computers shut down as pilots tried to follow flight paths that existed only in the realm of dreams and metaphor. The perfect geometric formation of the Carethian fleet began to dissolve as individual. Ships started making erratic maneuvers. One cruiser began spinning in place as its pilot became convinced that rotation was the key to understanding the universe through interpretive dance. Another warship started broadcasting poetry on all frequencies as its communication officer tried to translate human emotional colors into mathematical formulas. "It's working," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. "Their entire command structure is breaking down. They can't process human thought patterns. Their minds aren't flexible enough to handle our kind of creativity." Jake watched as the mighty Carethian war fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, became a collection of confused ships piloted by officers who were experiencing cognitive overload. The systematic bombardment of Ceres colony stopped as gunners became distracted by the philosophical implications of using butterfly migration patterns to calculate firing solutions. "Broadcast this on all human frequencies," Jake ordered. "Tell every human ship in the galaxy what we've discovered. Tell them that our weakness was actually our strength all along. We're not failed logicians or inferior strategists. We're something much more dangerous. We're creative chaos in a universe that runs on predictable rules." The signal spread through human communication networks, carrying news of the victory at Ceres colony to every corner of human space. On Earth, Admiral Wright watched the tactical reports with amazement. On distant colony worlds, human settlers looked up at the sky with new hope. On Federation Council worlds, alien diplomats began urgent discussions about the implications of human creativity as a weapon. But the most important message was the one that the Carethian Empire received. As their fleet limped away from Ceres colony in complete disarray, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity was no longer the weak species that could be bullied and enslaved. They had discovered their true weapon, and it was more powerful than any technology in the galaxy. It was the ability to think thoughts that no other species could understand, to find solutions that existed beyond the boundaries of logic, to be gloriously, chaotically, impossibly human. 6 months after the victory at Ceres colony, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Defiance and watched as diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy approached Earth. The ship was humanity's new flagship, built with technology gifted by grateful allies who had once considered humans to be inferior. The irony was not lost on him that the same species who had dismissed humanity as weak now competed too. Offer them treaties and trade agreements. The news of humanity's cognitive warfare capabilities had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Corinthian Empire, once the most feared military power in known space, had suffered 3 more devastating defeats as human ships used the Pandora Array to turn their own logical minds against them. Entire Corinthian battle fleets had been reduced to confusion and chaos by small human patrol ships broadcasting pure creativity into their communication networks. Dr. Lisa Hayes approached Jake's command chair, carrying a datapad filled with reports from research stations across human space. She looked tired but satisfied, her eyes bright with the excitement of discovery. "Admiral, the latest tests are remarkable. We've successfully trained crews from 17 different human ships to use controlled cognitive broadcasts. The technique is spreading faster than we can document it." Jake nodded, still amazed by how quickly everything had changed. "Any problems with mental side effects?" "None, sir. In fact, the opposite seems to be true. Humans who participate in the broadcasts report feeling more creative and mentally flexible afterward. It's as if using our chaotic thinking patterns as weapons actually makes us better at being human." On the communication station, Lieutenant Amy Foster monitored incoming messages from across the galaxy. She had been promoted twice since Ceres' colony, and Jake was proud to see how she had grown into her responsibilities. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian Collective. Ambassador Kelleth is requesting an immediate audience." "Put him through, Lieutenant." The main screen shimmered to life, showing the crystalline features of Ambassador Kelleth. The Zephyrians were an ancient species, proud and sophisticated, who had ruled the core worlds for thousands of years. 6 months ago, they would never have bothered to speak directly with a human officer. Today, Kelleth's tone was respectful, almost humble. "Admiral Morrison, the Collective wishes to formally apologize for our previous treatment of humanity. We failed to recognize your species' unique capabilities, and we hope to correct that error through closer cooperation." Jake kept his expression neutral, though inside he felt a surge of satisfaction. "What kind of cooperation did you have in mind, Ambassador?" "The Collective has been analyzing your cognitive warfare techniques, and we believe they could be beneficial to our own military forces. Not as weapons, but as training tools. Small doses of human creative thinking might help our officers develop more flexible tactical approaches." It was the same request Jake had been receiving from species across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to learn from humanity's chaotic creativity, but they wanted it in controlled, manageable doses. They still didn't understand that creativity couldn't be controlled or managed. It had to be embraced completely, chaos and all. "We'll consider your proposal, Ambassador. Dr. Hayes will be in touch with your research division to establish proper protocols." After the transmission ended, Jake walked to the observation deck, where he could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel. Commander Ryan Clark joined him, carrying his own reports from the Human Cognitive Defense Corps. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Ryan said quietly. 6 months ago, we were nobody. Today, half the galaxy wants to be our allies, and the other half is too scared to be our enemies." Jake smiled. "The Vorthan Sovereignty requested a non-aggression pact yesterday. Apparently, their psychic abilities don't work well against minds that are actively embracing chaos. They can't read thoughts that don't follow logical patterns. And the Corinthians? Complete withdrawal from human space." Their high command issued a statement declaring humans to be an unpredictable and dangerous species that should be avoided at all costs. Ryan chuckled. I can live with that reputation. Dr. Hayes appeared on the observation deck, her datapad now showing images from human colonies throughout the galaxy. Admiral, I wanted to show you the latest reports from our colony worlds. The cognitive warfare program isn't just changing how other species see us. It's changing how we see ourselves. The images showed human settlements that were flourishing in ways that had seemed impossible just months before. Farmers were developing new agricultural techniques that combined art and science in ways that shouldn't work but produced incredible results. Engineers were building structures that defied conventional physics but somehow remained stable. Artists and scientists were collaborating on projects that created beauty and function in equal measure. It's like we've given ourselves permission to be fully human for the first time, Dr. Hayes continued. For 50 years, we tried to fit into the galaxy by becoming more like the other species. More logical, more predictable, more controlled. But our strength was never in being like them. Our strength was in being completely different. Jake nodded, understanding what she meant. Humanity had spent decades trying to prove they belonged in a galaxy that valued order and logic. They had suppressed their creativity, their chaos, their tendency to find solutions that made no sense to anyone else. In doing so, they had hidden their greatest advantage. Security Chief Maria Santos joined them on the observation deck. Her own reports showing the transformation of human military forces. Admiral, the Defense Corps is reporting remarkable success rates in training exercises. Human officers who embrace chaotic thinking are outperforming traditional tactical algorithms by enormous margins. How are the other species adapting to our new role in galactic politics? Jake asked. Cautiously, sir. They respect us now, but they're also wary. The Galactic Federation has officially recognized humanity as a major power, but they've also established new protocols for dealing with what they call cognitively unpredictable species. Jake laughed. Cognitively unpredictable. I like that. It's much better than weak or inferior. Amy Foster's voice came over the ship's communication system. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Wright is requesting a status report on the diplomatic negotiations. Jake made his way back to the bridge, followed by his senior staff. Admiral Wright appeared on the main screen, looking far more relaxed than she had during the crisis at Ceres Colony. Behind her, Jake could see the bustling activity of Earth Command's new expanded operations center. Jake, I wanted to congratulate you and your crew again on the remarkable success of the cognitive warfare program. The Federation Council has officially recognized Earth as an equal partner in galactic governance, and we've received trade offers from species we've never even heard of before. Thank you, Admiral. How are the colonies adjusting to their new status? Remarkably well. Morale is higher than it's been in decades. For the first time since first contact, humans feel like they have a real place in the galaxy. Not as servants or second-class citizens, but as equals who bring something unique and valuable to the galactic community. Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The scared, desperate crew that had discovered the Pathfinder just 6 months ago had become this foundation of humanity's transformation from galactic underdogs to respected equals. They had proven that sometimes the greatest weakness could become the greatest strength, and that being different was more valuable than fitting in. Admiral Wright, what are our long-term goals for the cognitive warfare program? Expansion, but careful expansion. Dr. Hayes and her team are establishing training centers on 12 human worlds, teaching our people to embrace and control their creative chaos. We're also working with friendly alien species to develop applications for peaceful cooperation rather than warfare. As the transmission ended, Jake looked around his bridge at the crew who had started this revolution. Amy Foster, monitoring. Communications from species who now treated humans as equals. Ryan Clark, coordinating with military forces who now studied human tactics. Maria Santos, protecting a species that no longer needed to hide from galactic bullies. Dr. Hayes, researching the power of human creativity that had changed everything. They had learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. Being human wasn't a flaw to be corrected or a weakness to be hidden. It was a gift to be celebrated, a strength to be unleashed, and a weapon more powerful than any technology. In a universe full of logical, predictable species, the chaotic creativity of humanity had become the ultimate force for change. They were no longer the weak species begging for acceptance. They were the impossible species that had taught the galaxy to think differently, and that made all the difference in the universe.